So my closing words are really a closing reflection for this story we just heard. But I want to give you a little bit of context for the story about the Schnitzers. So the year prior to the story that we just heard, there had been attacks on Native Americans in the community. And then there were attacks on African Americans, and then ultimately on the Jewish community. And finally, that community said enough. They said enough, and they wound up being inspired by a young boy and his mother. In the picture book, Isaac looks about 12 years old, but I did a little bit of research, and Isaac Schnitzer was actually 5 years old. So the story of the classroom in here is a story of a kindergarten classroom. And we had a number of kindergartners in the first service, and we have some folks that are a couple of years ahead of that in this room right now. I see you, Soren. And this is a story about how we can make a difference in our neighbors' lives. This is a story about how that work includes people of all ages, including children. Sadly, from what I shared earlier in the service with you, episodes like this are repeating themselves in Montana right now, in Whitefish, Montana. But actually, episodes like this are repeating themselves all around the country. And college students, for example, acts of anti-Semitism have doubled in the last year. And so millennials are talking about how they feel like they're living through the stories that their grandparents witnessed. And here in Morristown, we've seen acts of hatred at times hurled towards the immigrant community, whether the Spanish-speaking community, whether the Muslim community, and many others. And here in Morris County, not far from here, a Rockaway playground had an experience where someone had drawn swastikas and the N-word in chalk on the playground equipment. And so, of course, they cleaned the playground equipment. And then, unfortunately, people came back in the middle of the night and this time drew the swastikas with ink and etched in the N-word. But the town of Rockaway grabbed a sander and made sure that the playground was once again a welcoming space for all children. We need to take hope from times when communities around the globe have risen up together and truly stood on the side of love. And what happened in Billings was that the white supremacist group that was enacting all these deeds of hatred and violence actually was silenced and went away. But sometimes I think we forget that this work of loving across difference, of peace building, of compassion and understanding and learning from one another's differences and commonalities, this is something that we need to continually invest our lives in. And this is one of those moments. I have heard a lot of people talking about not normalizing the language that we're hearing in politics these days, language that demeans many groups which are identified as other, whether LGBTQ identified people, whether women, whether immigrants, whether Muslims, whether Jews, whether many groups, unfortunately, are being included. But it's not just about not normalizing these things. The question is not, is it normal behavior? The question is it moral behavior? Even if an entire kindergarten or third grade started bullying someone in the class that they identified as different, perhaps an Isaac Schnitzer, then I say to the children who are in this room, I hope that you would have the courage, especially if this was not witnessed by an adult, to go to your teacher and to ask for their help in solving what you just saw happen. And to the adults out here, if this was happening in your workplace or around the family table, I hope that you would summon the courage to speak out and to speak up. The question is not, is it normal? The question is it right? Is it just? Is it loving? The flame in our chalice over here represents a willingness to sacrifice for love. This symbol was created during the Second World War when Unitarians were working in Europe to rescue Jewish children primarily, and also many adults and people outside of the Jewish tradition who were considered on the fringes. They couldn't put words on paper that they were basically the resistance against the Nazis and Hitler. And so they sought to have a symbol that they could put on pages that they would become known for. And Hans Deutsch, the artist, created the flaming chalice with the idea that it was a symbol of being willing to take risks for love. So we are a people who believes that within each human heart resides the spark of the divine. Let that light shine out brightly throughout this season and in the days to come. And may each one of us have the courage and the compassion to speak out and to speak up until every human being is included in the light of love. May it be so.